The Montreal Gazette, formerly titled The Gazette, is the only English-language daily newspaper published in Montreal, Quebec, Canada, after 3 other daily English newspapers shut down at various times during the second half of the 20th century. It is one of the French-speaking province's 2 last surviving English-language dailies. The other is the Sherbrooke Record, which serves the anglophone minority in the Eastern Townships southeast of Montreal. Founded in 1778 by Fleury Mesplet, the Gazette is Quebec's oldest daily newspaper. The oldest newspaper overall is the Quebec Chronicle-Telegraph, which was established in 1764 and is published weekly. History: Fleury Mesplet founded a French-language weekly newspaper called Le Gazette du Commerce et Littéraire, pour la ville district de Montréal on June 3, 1778. It was the first entirely French-language newspaper in Canada. The paper did not accept advertising aside for the various books Mesplet also published. The articles were meant to promote discussion and focused on literature and philosophy, as well as various anecdotal articles, poems and letters. This paper, which was considered an organ for pro-American revolutionary propaganda, Mesplet, an immigrant from France, had previously lived in Philadelphia and sided with the Americans when they occupied Montreal during the American Revolutionary War. The newspaper was shut down in 1779 when Mesplet and the editor, Valentin Joutard, were arrested for sedition and imprisoned for 3 years. Mesplet began a second weekly, the Montreal Gazette, the Gazette de Montréal, on August 25, 1785, which had a dual French-English bilingual format similar to that used by the Quebec Gazette. Its offices were located in the house of Joseph Lemoyne de Longueuil on Rue de la Capitale. French columns were in the left-hand column and English columns in the right-hand column. The columns were originally written in French and translated to English by Valentin Joutard, who served as editor until his death in 1787. The columns were mostly on education, religion and literature, and after 1788 on politics. Foreign and local news made up the rest of the paper. The paper took a Voltairean and anti-clerical stance, wanted Quebec to have its own legislative assembly, and sought to import the principles of the French Revolution to Quebec. The newspaper also introduced advertising and announcements, taking up half of 4 pages. It is the direct ancestor of the current newspaper. The newspaper did well, and Mesplet's operation moved to Notre Dame Street in 1787. Mesplet continued to operate the newspaper until his death in 1794. Following Mesplet's death, his widow published the newspaper for several issues, but the paper ceased publication soon after. 2 rivals, Louis Roy and Edward Edwards, fought over the right to publish the newspaper over the course of 2 years. Edwards eventually won the printing press and newspaper, and continued operations until his assets were seized in 1808. The newspaper was then the property of James Brown for 14 years. In 1822, it was sold to businessman Thomas Andrew Turner, who converted into an English-only paper in 1822. Under Turner, the Gazette identified with the interests of Anglophone business leaders in the fight with the Patriot movement. On April 25, 1849, the Gazette published a special edition in which its editor-in-chief, James Moyer Ferrers, called the Anglo-Saxon residents to arms after royal assent over compensation law for Lower Canada. This was among the main events leading to the burning of the Parliament buildings. Ferrers was subsequently arrested. In 1968, the Gazette was acquired by the Southern newspaper chain, which owned major dailies across Canada. For many years, the Gazette was caught in a three-way fight for the English newspaper audience in Montreal with the tabloid Montreal Herald and the broadsheet Montreal Star. The Gazette was second in circulation to the Montreal Star, which sold more newspapers in the city and had a significant national reputation in the first half of the 20th century. The Montreal Herald closed in 1957 after publishing for 146 years. The Montreal Star, part of the publications chain, endured a long strike and ceased publication in 1979, less than a year after the strike was settled. In 1988, a competing English-language daily, the Montreal Daily News, was launched. The Montreal Daily News adopted a tabloid format and introduced a Sunday edition, forcing the Gazette to respond. After the Montreal Daily News folded in 1989, after less than 2 years in operation, the Gazette kept its Sunday edition going until August 2010. In 1996, the Southern papers were bought by Conrad Black's Hollinger Inc. Then in August 2000, Hollinger sold the Southern newspapers, including the Gazette, to CanWest Global Communications Corp., controlled by the Winnipeg-based Asper family. In 2010, a new media group, Post Media, bought the Gazette and other papers from the financially troubled CanWest. To celebrate its 150th anniversary, the Gazette published a facsimile of one of its earliest issues. Much effort was made to use a type of paper that imitated 18th-century paper, with fake chain lines and laid lines to make the paper look old. Today, the Gazette's audience is primarily Quebec's English-speaking community. The Gazette is one of the 4 dailies published in Montreal, the other 3 being French-language newspapers. In recent years, the Gazette has stepped up efforts to reach bilingual francophone professionals and adjusted its coverage accordingly. The current editor-in-chief is Lucinda Chodin and the associate managing editors are James Bissell and Jeff Blond. On April 30, 2013, Post Media Network announced that it would be eliminating the role of publisher at each of its newspapers, including the Gazette. Instead, the company's 10 newspapers will be overseen by regional publishers, one each for the Pacific, the Prairies and Eastern Canada. Alan Allnut, who was the publisher of the Gazette at the time, became the regional publisher of Post Media's Alberta and Saskatchewan papers. Jerry Knott, publisher of the Ottawa Citizen, now also oversees the Gazette, the Windsor Star and Post Media's flagship title, the National Post. On May 5, 2014, it was announced that printing of the Gazette would be contracted out to Transcontinental Media in August 2014 and that the existing Notre Dame de Grace facility would be closed, resulting in a loss of 54 full-time and 61 part-time positions at the paper. The August 16, 2014 issue was the final issue printed by the Post Media-owned facility. On October 21, 2014, the Gazette was relaunched as part of the Post Media Reimagined project, adopting a similar look and similar suite of digital platforms to its sister paper, the Ottawa Citizen, which had relaunched earlier in the year. As part of the relaunch, the paper was officially renamed the Montreal Gazette, reflecting its long-standing common name outside its city of publication. The paper had not included Montreal in its masthead in several years. The new typeface and style introduced with the rename has been criticized as being subpar. Sections: weekdays, section A, local, national and international news, opinion columns, editorials, editorial cartoon, letters to the editor, business news, sports news, arts and entertainment news. Section B, sports, business, food, movies. Section C, driving and classifieds. Saturday. Section A, local, national and international news. Section B, Saturday Extra, feature stories and opinion columns, editorials, editorial cartoon, letters to the editor. Section C, business news and weather. Section D, sports. Section E, culture. Section F, home front, classified, working. Section G, travel. Section H, weekend life. Section W, diversions. Editors-in-chief: Mark Harrison, Norman Webster, Joan Fraser, Alan Allnut, Peter Stockland, Andrew Phillips, Raymond Brassard, Lucinda Choden. Present personalities, past personalities,